Hey everyone, and welcome back to Radio BFit. So glad you could join us for another deep dive where we really try to cut through all the noise, the trends and the marketing hype and just get to what actually works.
And I am thrilled to be here. We know so many of you are already, well, you're highly motivated. You're the learners. You're meticulously planning your workouts, tracking your macros. The effort is absolutely there.
Exactly. You're putting in all this work, but there's still this nagging feeling, right? And maybe you've hit a plateau that you just can't explain, or you're fighting this fatigue that sleep doesn't seem to touch.
Or just a general motivational flatness.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like you're putting in 100% effort, but only getting, 70% of the results back. You're doing all the right things, but the engine just isn't roaring.
And that gap, that space between the effort and the outcome, is exactly what we are going to decode today. We're going to zero in on a really foundational hormone for male vitality, testosterone.
Right. And specifically, these four hidden lifestyle traps that are sabotaging levels, often way more than just, getting older.
That's the key. This is happening faster and more devastatingly than simple aging for a lot of men.
And we're going to go beyond the sort of conventional wisdom here, past the usual lift heavy and eat steak advice.
Yeah.
The surprising thing is that these habits are, well, they're everywhere.
They seem totally benign, just part of modern life. But they have this compounding, suppressive effect that just quietly builds up until one day you realize you're just dragging.
For our audience who really values getting knowledge quickly, understanding the mechanism, the why behind the sabotage is the fastest way to start fixing it.
Absolutely. And why does this matter so much beyond just the gym? Well, testosterone is like the orchestra conductor for the male body. It regulates mood, cognitive function, bone density, metabolism.
It's not just about muscle and libido.
Not at all. If your T levels are suppressed, the impact is systemic. It affects your clarity, your energy, your recovery, everything.
So if you feel like you've been running on that perpetual 70% battery, this deep dive is basically your diagnostic checklist. We're going to identify the science-backed traps and then map out the strategic corrections.
And as always, the foundational material for our discussion comes from the clear, practical, data-driven articles you can find over at bfit.ai. It's an amazing free resource for this kind of insight.
Okay, let's unpack this. So I think we have to start with the central lie we've all been told for decades, this idea that decline is just inevitable.
Oh, absolutely. The narrative was so simple, right? You're getting older, so expect less energy, expect slower recovery. Low T was just blamed on your birthday.
Accepted as this predictable slide you just have to deal with after 40.
And that whole narrative is just becoming more and more flawed. I mean, yes, there's a gradual natural decline, maybe 1 to 2% per year after middle age. But what we're seeing now is...
Well, it's far more dramatic.
We're seeing men in their late 20s, their 30s, coming in with hormonal profiles that honestly should belong to a man 15 or even 20 years older.
Wow. Okay, so that's the pivotal aha moment right there. It means the number one driver for so many guys isn't their age. It's the sum of their daily choices.
Precisely. And that shifts the entire focus from, resignation to responsibility. If it's your lifestyle, then it's fixable.
This brings us to a concept you mentioned from the source material, the compounding effect.
Yes. You have to stop thinking of this as one single problem. It's the cumulative load of small daily suppressions.
So how does that compounding effect actually work in the body?
Okay, think of your endocrine system, your hormone system, as operating above a certain noise floor. Every little thing, a night of 6 hours of sleep, a stressful commute, reheating lunch in a plastic container, it pushes that noise floor up just a tiny bit.
Just a little bit. On its own, no big deal.
All right, individually they're minor. But when you layer them, poor sleep plus processed food plus chronic deadlines, they create this constant low-grade systemic stress. And that stress, quietly, persistently, suppresses the machinery that's responsible for producing testosterone.
So it's not one big event that crashes your T. It's the constant background static that just prevents the signal from getting through clearly. You're forcing your body to fight all these tiny fires instead of, building a strong foundation.
That's a perfect analogy. And it's why guys who are doing mostly good things, lifting 3 times a week, not smoking, can still feel suboptimal.
Yeah.
They're fighting against this daily buildup of suppressors they haven't even identified.
So by isolating these main categories, we can start to target the biggest noise generators and neutralize them.
Exactly.
So let's introduce them. The 4 stealthy saboteurs we need to defeat. According to our source material, they are, first, sleep, which is surprisingly fast in its effects. Second, diet, which has that dual challenge of deficiencies and excesses. Third, these hidden disruptor stress and environmental toxins. And fourth, exercise and balance. The irony, where your workout could actually be working against you.
And we should start with the highest leverage move, the one thing you can fix tonight that will give you the fastest results, and that's sleep.
The evidence here is just good. It's indisputable, isn't it? If someone is struggling with fatigue, low drive, poor recovery, the very first question has to be, how is your sleep?
It has to be. The source confirms it's the most rapid way to suppress testosterone, period. And this isn't just, anecdotal. It's deeply rooted in our biological timing.
For circadian rhythm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Testosterone synthesis follows a very strong, non-negotiable circadian rhythm. Your body's programmed to do its major manufacturing and repair work at night.
Can you break down that mechanism? Like, what's happening during the night? Where does the signal even start?
So the signal starts in the brain, in the pituitary gland. It releases something called luteinizing hormone, or LH. LH then travels down to the Leydig cells in the testes and basically tells them, okay, time to make testosterone. But the crucial part is when this happens, the pituitary sends out these LH pulses most intensely during the night, specifically during your deepest, most restorative REM sleep.
So if I'm cutting my sleep short, or if it's fragmented, if I'm not getting those deep, consolidated blocks of REM sleep, I'm basically preventing my brain from sending its most powerful manufacturing order.
You are literally cutting the power supply to the factory during peak production hours. It's an immediate dose-dependent relationship. You cut the duration, the hormonal yield for the next day plummets.
Let's talk about the quantifiable evidence from the source, because this really brings it home. The study you mentioned, what was the magnitude of that drop?
This was the pivotal University of Chicago study. They took healthy young men, and they restricted them to just 5 hours of sleep per night for only 1 week.
Just 1 week.
And the finding was a staggering 10 to 15% average drop in their total testosterone levels in 7 days.
A 10 to 15% drop? I mean, you can nail your diet, kill every workout, and then undo a decade's worth of hormonal health by just skimping on sleep for a week.
And that's the key comparison the researchers made. That 10 to 15% decline is the equivalent of 10 to 15 years of natural aging.
That is terrifying.
It should be. It just underscores how non-negotiable this is. If you're chronically sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night, that acute drop becomes your new, debilitating baseline.
So sleep isn't supplemental, it's the cornerstone. If someone listening is running on 6 hours, what's the fix?
The goal has to be 7 to 9 hours of quality, uninterrupted sleep. And the key word there is quality. You have to optimize the environment.
Practical tips. What can people do tonight?
First, the room has to be dark and cool. Total darkness maximizes melatonin release. Second, consistency. A regular sleep and wake time helps anchor that circadian rhythm, making sure the T production cycle starts on schedule.
Let's get into the modern sleep killer, though. Blue light. I mean, I think every single person listening is guilty of checking their phone right before they close their eyes.
Oh, it's critical. The blue light threat is so potent because of how it messes with melatonin. We have these special light receptors in our eyes that are highly sensitive to the blue wavelengths from our screens.
Right.
When those receptors detect that blue light, they send a signal straight to the brain's master clock, and it actively suppresses the production of melatonin.
So turning off the lamp isn't enough if you're holding a glowing screen an inch from your face. You're chemically telling your body it's still daytime.
Precisely. And that leads to worse sleep quality, less time in REM, and therefore a direct compromise of that whole sleep hormone axis. The simple fix, which is hard but so high leverage, is a strict digital sunset.
Meaning?
Turn off or at least significantly limit your screen exposure 60 to 90 minutes before you plan to sleep. If you have to be on a screen, get some blue light filtering glasses or switch your device to a warm redshift setting.
So if you prioritize 7 to 9 hours of quality, dark, cool sleep, you are, hands down, making the single biggest correction you can. That's step 1. But now let's move on to what's hidden in plain sight. What you're eating every day.
All right, this next trap, diet, can be so frustrating. Because you can look at your food log, you see you're getting enough protein, you're avoiding obvious junk food, but your energy and your drive are still off.
It's so true. And it comes down to what the source calls the deficiency excess dilemma. Hormone synthesis is a complex chemical process. If you're missing the specific raw materials, the machine just grinds to a halt.
On the other hand,
On the other hand, if you overload the system with ingredients that promote chronic inflammation, you're actively damaging the machine itself.
so let's start with the building blocks. What are the crucial precursors that are often missing, even in diets that seem healthy?
We have to focus on two: zinc and vitamin D. These are not just, trace minerals or vitamins. They're foundational cofactors and regulators in the testosterone synthesis pathway. Can you get a little more specific? How do they actually work?
Okay, so take zinc. Testosterone is made in the Leydig cells, and that process involves several key enzymes. Zinc acts as a vital cofactor, basically enabling those enzymes to do their job of converting cholesterol into testosterone. If your zinc is low, those reactions slow way down.
It's starving the production line.
Exactly. And there's vitamin D.
Right. We all know it's important, but what's its direct link to T levels?
Well, vitamin D actually behaves more like a steroid hormone itself. And crucially, the Leydig cells of T factories, they have vitamin D receptors on them. When those receptors are activated by enough vitamin D, it helps regulate and optimize the whole production process.
So it's a signaling molecule.
It is. And the research shows a really strong correlation. Optimize your vitamin D, and you optimize the signaling capacity of those cells. But given how much time we all spend indoors, deficiency is it's rampant. It's a huge overlooked inhibitor.
Okay, so that's the deficiency side. Not enough parts for the machine. What about the excess side, the things that are actively breaking the system down?
We're talking primarily about a high intake of ultra-processed foods, added sugars, and refined carbohydrates. These three things drive a rapid, repeated spike in insulin. And when that happens over and over, it promotes systemic, low-grade inflammation. That inflammation acts as a direct suppressor on the entire communication network that tells your body to make testosterone in the first place.
So you're starving the system of raw materials while simultaneously poisoning the communication lines with inflammation. That's a terrible combo.
And if that wasn't bad enough, there's a third part of the diet trap, the direct conversion mechanism.
Yes. Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. The specific link between body fat and, well, active hormonal sabotage.
Right, and we have to distinguish between types of body fat. We're not talking about the jiggly fat under the skin. We're talking about the deep, metabolically active fat around your organs. Visceral belly fat. That stuff is not just inert storage.
It acts like an organ itself.
It behaves like an endocrine organ, yes. And it's the true saboteur. It produces an enzyme called aromatase.
Aromatase, and what does that do?
Aromatase does one thing. It actively converts androgen hormones, specifically testosterone, into the primary female hormone, estradiol, a form of estrogen.
Oh, wow.
So the more visceral fat you carry, the more aromatase you have, and the more your testosterone gets converted into estrogen. It creates this destructive feedback loop.
So low T makes it easier to gain fat, and then that fat accelerates the conversion of what little T you have left into estrogen.
Exactly. That's a powerful realization. It transforms managing your body fat from just a cosmetic goal into a non-negotiable strategic move for your hormonal health.
Okay, so let's give the listener an actionable plan. How do they audit their plate?
Start with the nutrients. Prioritize rich sources of zinc. Oysters are the king, but also pumpkin seeds, beef. For vitamin D, get some safe sun exposure, but for many of us, supplementation is going to be critical, especially in the winter.
And for eliminating the suppressors.
You have to dramatically reduce the drivers of inflammation. So added sugars, refined flours, and especially industrial seed oils like corn, soy, and canola oil. Swap those for healthy fats like olive oil and avocado oil.
The big picture here is that managing your body composition isn't just about how you look. It's about shutting down that aromatase machinery that's constantly working against you. Okay, let's shift gears now to trap 3, the invisible tax of stress and chemicals. This trap deals with the burdens of modern life that are so easy to ignore because they're constant. Chronic stress and this relentless exposure to environmental toxins.
Right. For the person who has their sleep dialed in, their diet is clean, but they still feel drained.
Yeah.
This constant hormonal tax is probably the missing link. Our systems evolved to handle acute, short-term stress, a fight or flight situation.
Not 16 hours a day of low-grade psychological stress from emails and traffic.
Exactly, not that, combined with a constant bath of synthetic chemicals.
Let's tackle the stress side first. We all know stress produces cortisol. But how does my looming work deadline actually steal resources from my testosterone production?
It comes down to a shared manufacturing pipeline, a critical trade-off. All of your steroid hormones, cortisol, testosterone, estrogen, they all start from the same precursor chemical,
Okay.
cholesterol.
Okay.
Cholesterol gets converted into something called pregnenolone, which acts as the master precursor.
So pregnenolone is like the raw clay that can be molded into all these different
That's a
hormones?
great way to think of it.
Hmm.
And when your body perceives stress, whether that's running from a predator or just fighting with your email inbox,
Hmm.
it shifts its priority to survival.
Right.
It dramatically ramps up the conversion of that pregnenolone down the stress pathway, primarily to make cortisol. This is what the source material calls the pregnenolone steal.
The pregnenolone steal. That's a perfect visualization. The body is saying, okay, I have limited clay. Survival, which is cortisol, takes absolute priority over everything else. Muscle building, libido, that can wait.
Precisely. And if you live in a state of chronic stress, that cortisol pathway is always prioritized. That steal is happening indefinitely. Your body is constantly operating on a crisis budget, and T production gets sacrificed.
That explains that feeling of being wired and tired, the exhaustion and low drive that comes with chronic stress. Okay, now let's talk about the other side of this trap, the environmental mimics.
Right, so these are the endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. They're synthetic chemicals that are just about everywhere in modern life. The big ones are bisphenol A, BPA, phthalates, and parabens.
And why are these EDCs so uniquely bad for hormones?
They're dangerous because their chemical structure is really similar to natural estrogen. They're what we call estrogen mimics. So they get into your body and they bind to your estrogen receptors and they activate them.
So they trick your body into thinking there's a flood of estrogen that isn't really there?
Yes. And that massive false estrogen signal further disrupts that delicate hormonal communication axis we talked about earlier. So you're dealing with the internal conversion from aromatase, and now you're bombarding the system with external chemicals that mimic estrogen, which further suppresses the signal to make testosterone.
It's a war on multiple fronts. So where do we find this stuff? BPA is in plastics, right?
It's in polycarbonate plastics and the lining of a lot of canned goods. And when you heat that plastic, the rate at which it leaches into your food just accelerates exponentially. Then you have phthalates, which make plastics flexible. They're in food wraps, shower curtains, and often in the synthetic fragrance in soaps and shampoos.
Wow. And parabens?
Parabens are preservatives used in countless personal care products and cosmetics, and just like phthalates, they show estrogenic activity. The cumulative burden of all these EDCs creates this toxic background noise your endocrine system has to constantly fight.
So how do we fight back? How do we manage this toxic load?
On the psychological side, the goal is to lower your cortisol baseline, and that requires deliberate daily practice. Things like focused breath work, even for just 5 minutes, meditation, or just structured time away from screens, like a walk in nature.
You have to consciously de-escalate the perceived crisis to slow down that pregnenolone steal.
Exactly. And on the chemical front, a few high-impact swaps. Avoid heating food in plastic containers. Use glass or ceramic instead. Switch to glass or stainless steel water bottles. And when you're buying personal care products, look for labels that specifically say phthalate-free or paraben-free.
So the takeaway is that by reducing this chronic background noise, both psychological and chemical, you're freeing up resources to be redirected back towards vitality and optimal function.
Okay, let's pivot to the fourth and final trap, the one that often confuses people who are active and in the gym. This is a scenario where, good intentions can go really wrong. We're taught that exercise is good, it's anabolic, it boosts T. But the source material highlights this danger in the chronic imbalance. It's the difference between strategic movement and just moving a lot. The body needs specific signals to stimulate T production. And if the chronic pattern of your training is primarily signaling stress and breakdown, it will suppress T no matter how many calories you burn.
So let's break down this cardio paradox. Why does a short, intense workout seem to help, but say marathon training volumes can just crash your hormones long term?
It all comes back to that cortisol response and duration. A heavy lifting session or a short sprint, that's an acute stimulus. Cortisol spikes briefly, but the hormonal cascade that follows includes a robust increase in T and growth hormone to help with repair. It's anabolic.
But where does it cross the line into being suppressive?
It crosses the line when the duration becomes excessive. Think 90 minutes or more of continuous running or cycling day after day. That kind of chronic, excessive endurance volume elevates cortisol for prolonged periods. It becomes a sustained catabolic or breakdown signal.
But wait, if cortisol is spiking, doesn't that just mean I'm working hard? Why is that bad long term?
That's a critical distinction. The intensity from heavy lifting primarily activates a pathway called mTOR, which is all about protein synthesis and growth. It's an anabolic signal.
Okay.
But chronic long-duration cardio increasingly activates a different pathway called AMPK. AMPK is the body's energy sensor. It turns on when your cellular energy is depleted, and when it's chronically elevated, it signals an energy crisis. It starts breaking down tissue for fuel.
So the body's message during like a 2-hour run is basically, we're starving and running for our lives. Start building muscle and conserve energy.
That is precisely the message. And that directly translates to lower T and a much harder time recovering. You're depleting your hormonal reserves in the name of endurance.
Which brings us to the strength solution. What kind of training sends the most potent signal for T production?
Consistent, heavy resistance training, and specifically a focus on compound lifts.
The big ones.
The big ones: squats, deadlifts, bench press, overhead press, rows, exercises that engage multiple large muscle groups at the same time. These demand a massive systemic effort.
And why do those beat out something like, say, a bicep curl in this context?
Because the more muscle mass you recruit, the greater the hormonal cascade you trigger. Compound lifts signal to the body, we need a massive amount of repair and adaptation here. And the body responds by releasing its most powerful anabolic hormones, including T and growth hormone, to get the job done.
So if your workout routine is, 80% long runs on the treadmill and 20% isolation work, you need to reevaluate if hormonal health is a primary goal.
You absolutely do. The actual plan here is to rebalance that portfolio. Prioritize 3 to 4 strength training sessions a week and make compound movements the anchor of that training.
What about the person who loves cardio? How do they get the heart health benefits without the catabolic state?
The strategy is efficiency. Favor shorter high-intensity intervals, or HIIT, a couple of times a week. Those give you that beneficial hormonal spike without the long-duration cortisol burden. And if you enjoy longer sessions, just keep them truly moderate and make sure you're well-fueled to avoid that deep energy depletion.
And the final piece, of course, is recovery, which brings us full circle.
Recovery is where all the magic happens. Training provides the signal, but the actual synthesis and growth happens when you rest. Overtraining, which is just intense training without enough recovery and nutrition, is a guaranteed path to hormonal depletion.
Okay, we've broken down all 4 traps: sleep, diet, hidden disruptors, and exercise imbalance. Now, how does someone listening connect this all back to their own experience? What's the cluster of symptoms they should look for?
And we have to emphasize, it's a cluster, not just one symptom. If you notice a persistent collection of these things, it's time to investigate. The most reliable ones include persistent, unexplained fatigue.
The kind that a weekend of rest doesn't fix.
Exactly. Then, a significantly reduced libido, difficulty building or even maintaining muscle despite training hard, an unwanted increase in that stubborn visceral belly fat.
Aromatase factor.
Aromatase factor, yes. And noticeable mood changes, like being chronically irritable or having low motivation. And finally, just poor recovery from your workouts.
That clustering is the key. Everyone feels one of those things sometimes, but if you're ticking 3 or 4 boxes consistently, your lifestyle is probably taking a serious toll.
And this really speaks to the whole aging question. The guy in his 40s or 50s who says, "Isn't this just my age?" We have to be really clear. While a gradual decline is normal, those severe, debilitating symptoms we just listed are not inevitable.
Lifestyle is playing a much bigger role than your actual age.
A far larger role. And you can significantly mitigate and often reverse that decline through optimization.
So if those symptoms are there, getting a blood test is the logical next step. But you said a total testosterone reading isn't enough. What should someone ask for to get the full picture?
This is so important for figuring out where the problem is. You need 4 key markers drawn first thing in the morning. First, total testosterone. That's your overall production.
Okay.
Second, SHBG, or sex hormone binding globulin. This is a protein that binds to testosterone and makes it unavailable.
So it's like your T is locked in a vault.
Exactly. Third is free testosterone. This is the critical one. It's the bioavailable T the body can actually use. And fourth, estradiol, your estrogen level, which tells you how much of that aromatase conversion is happening.
That complete picture lets you see if the problem is low production, bad transport, or excessive conversion. Without all 4, you're just guessing.
You're just guessing. And the crucial caveat is you must discuss these results and your symptoms with a knowledgeable healthcare provider, like an endocrinologist.
Before we wrap up, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The billion-dollar supplement market for T boosters. Does the science validate any of the hype?
The market noise is deafening. But the scientific reality is pretty quiet. Most of those over-the-counter boosters like D-aspartic acid or Tribulus, they offer, at best, minor, negligible, and temporary bumps for some people.
And nothing for others.
And nothing for others. They cannot fundamentally fix the compounding effect of a poor lifestyle. They're like using a tiny fire extinguisher when the whole house is on fire.
So, if someone is looking for a nutritional intervention, what are the reliable foundational supplements?
The only reliable ones are the raw materials, and they only work if you're actually deficient. So we go back to the big three: zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D. If a blood test confirms you're deficient, then targeted supplementation is absolutely necessary to restore normal function. They aren't boosters. They're just giving the factory the tools it was missing.
Which brings us all the way back to the core therapy, the big idea of this whole deep dive. The path to robust hormonal health isn't some magic pill.
Not at all. The foundation of vitality is built entirely on systematically identifying and removing these 4 modern lifestyle obstacles. Your body is designed for vitality, but it needs an environment free from this chronic suppression. You remove the brakes, and you allow your natural biology to thrive.
You play excellent defense and let your body win the game.
To synthesize all of this into an immediate plan for you, the learner, your goal is to systematically reduce these 4 suppressive burdens.
And don't try to fix everything at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm and burnout. Focus on where you'll get the biggest return for your effort.
Exactly. Your first step has to be an honest audit. Which of these 4 areas, sleep, diet, stress and toxins, or your training imbalance, which one is your absolute weakest link?
Maybe it's the fact that you haven't had a consistent bedtime in years. Or it's the daily takeout lunch in a plastic container.
Identify that single most glaring weakness and fortify that one first. That targeted effort is what will yield the most immediate, profound, and momentum-building results.
And that positive feedback will fuel all the other changes. And of course, if you need continued data-driven guidance on building a hormone-friendly diet or optimizing your training, make sure to explore the free resources and articles over at bfit.ai.
We really appreciate you joining us today for this deep dive. Understanding the complex why is always the first, most essential step toward taking effective action.
So what does this all mean? It means your daily, seemingly small habits hold the absolute power to either suppress or maximize your natural vitality. Choose wisely.
Until next time, stay well and continue learning.
See you next time for the next deep dive.